Hello, and thanks for joining me in this YouTube video on the Prince of Swords. So we are seeing that the princes are a very rich and diverse group of people to study, and this trend continues with the Prince of Swords. As you can see, he sits rather uncomfortably in his chariot, and there's a lot of disjointed, distorted and dispersed activity going on both in the background and with him. So with that in mind, and the fact that we are in the suit of swords, which generally spells trouble because it's all about the mind, we can expect a little bit of a rough ride with this character, even though all of the princes have the potential to be very useful people due to their connection with Keta through Tippereth, because they're associated with these 6 Sephiroth here. So he's heir of air, he's double air, and although you haven't got any elemental conflict there, the fact that he is all air means that he's rather imbalanced and he's not very grounded. There is some other elements that come into play because he controls he rules 3 of the minor arcana cards, and these make up his astrological nature as well. He is a third Capricorn and 2/3 Aquarius. Aquarius being his, which is an air sign, his main focus. So the card associated with Capricorn is the 4 of discs, which is a fairly stable card. The problem is that if we look at the elemental dignity rules, air and earth do not get on very well together and they weaken each other. And further, because he's moving away from this card, it's the last decan of Capricorn that we're looking at, with the 2 and 3 behind it, because it's the last decan. He's moving away from that and into the Aquarian energy. It means that this is rather weak. Also, something that we consider is the next card, which is the 5 of Swords. But his saving grace really is this card, which is a 6 of Swords, which I explained in quite a lot of detail in the tutorial on this in the minor arcana series. So I'll put some of that information in here, but I'll put a link into the actual all of the information if you are interested in that particular card. Okay, we'll move on to the next section and look at this card in detail. He's not as complex as the Prince of Cups, but he still has his own. There's still a fair bit to talk about him, so we'll see that next.
Okay, we've got a general picture of the Prince of Swords here. As I say, he's got a sword in one hand, a sickle in the left hand here. He got some geometrical pattern in the wings. Geometrical pattern here. He's sitting rather awkwardly on the chariot, so not comfortable with his life. Or certainly indicates a lot of activity. And down below here you've got replicas of him. Some people say they're like children or like fairies, which are like a lesser vibration of him, but they're an extension of him, and we'll see more of the symbology of that when we come to look at this in detail. As I say, not as complicated as the Prince of Cups. There we go. That's better. Okay, it's said that there's like a little cherub-like structure on his helmet here which connects him to Tippereth as well. So we'll have a look at that later. Onto the his elemental makeup. As I said, he's heir of air, which is over here. So all the princes represent the air of the suit, and he's double air there. So as we said, he's got an excess of air or intellect without really any grounding. So air and earth don't particularly get on well anyway. So we'll move on to the next one. The Tetragrammaton. And I think, as I've indicated with the previous princes, he represents the valve because he's the combination of the female or queen and the yod, which is the knight. So he's like a hybrid of the two, having some of the stability of the queen through the fixed chariot, even though because of his seated position he's not particularly comfortable with that fixed stable position, and he's got the activity and movement of the knight, so he's probably much more resembles the activity of the knight more than the queen there. Okay. Oops. I'm sorry about that. Here we go. That's the one I wanted. Associated with Tippereth, and as I indicated, that's the saving grace of the princes really, and it's like a spanner in the works, because we expect them to be always to be a bit precocious and stable and what have you, and yet they do have this connection with the middle pillar there with Keta, and so it always gives them an element of greatness. And even Mr. Crowley says about the Prince of Swords that some great minds have been associated with this card, and it's when this connection is working very well here, then you will have this connection to higher states, even if it's not particularly spiritual. It would be it would be states of philosophy of mind. People could be very into their higher mind, and that is linking in with this middle pillar here. What else can we say? So again, with this Sephiroth here, it's gone through the trials of the five and the opposites. The twos and threes. He's gone through this duality that's occurred in these two pillars there. So there is, that's why they call this Sephiroth, the harmony is associated with that, because he has begun to, the part of him that has reconciled these opposites within him. And in terms of the four worlds, it's got to be down here in Yetzirah because he's associated with air of air, so yeah, he has to be there. Okay, we'll have a look at his astrological makeup. Here's the court decan wheel here. Prince of Swords. Here, God, what the heck was that? Windows 10 for you. Prince of Swords. Right. So he's 1/3 Capricorn, and he's 2/3 Aquarius here, and that gives him rulership over the 4 of discs, the 5 of swords, and the 6 of swords. So this is where he is in the decan wheel. So I'll just have a quick look at his symbology there. So background is chaotic. You've got all those lines there. Represents his mind with lots of activity, no definite plan. It's not like he's going in any particular direction, and even in the background, he's like fighting through that, isn't he? He's like trapped within his own creation there. These wings with the geometry there represents the quality of air. And again, the geometry is all about the mind. Geometry is one of the 7 keys of creation, so if we go off track here a little bit. So it's all about the formed world. So for those that meditate, you may be able to see shapes inside of your meditation. and those shapes are to do with the sort of spirit coming into matter, for one, simplifying it right down. But form is all, you're getting into the realms of matter with any sort of form, even though their astral counterparts are so much more subtler in meditation. They're still of a pretty low vibration, but here he's right into his intellect there, and hence he is trapped by his mind. The winged fairies, or the children here, are going irresponsibly in random directions. They're not pulling together, so their efforts are pretty wasted. So the chariot's easy to move, but it doesn't really progress in any particular direction there. Again, a perfect example of how the mind can be. It can be very active, but not really very productive. So a part of him is out of control. He's got a sword in the right hand here. Again, this yellow is to do with air. That's the creator of ideas. The sword cuts through the air, forming thoughts in the process, shaping air into thoughts. So as I say, with these geometries here, that is thought. Thought does come in lines. Emotions come in waves. So the sword symbolically represents his ability to create these geometrical patterns, which are thought. The sickle in the left hand, again, is to do with, if you look, it's to do with the death card and Saturn, and that's essentially the cutting down of ideas. So he's constantly creating ideas and then chopping them down, which, if it's working well, if that link to the middle pillar is really strong, then it's like a scientist that will go on to one idea, then the other, and each one will progress until he gets to the answers that he wants. But that's him working at his very best. And quite often he doesn't. Let's say with all the court cards, have not gone through the 21 steps of the major arcana, so we're not looking at anything particularly spiritual here. So Crowley says he's a mass of fine ideal, unrelated to practical effort. I indicated that there was a child's head crest here, a secret crown in the card's nature, and this links to Tippereth, which I've talked about in detail there. We've got a geometrical figure within the green disc, which has 8 sides, and this relates to the 8th Sephiroth, which is Hod here, 3. I've just gone blank here. It's going to be, it's here. So that's all to do with the mind, because it's ruled by Mercury. Okay, so what we will do now is move on to the 4 cards that he rules. 4 of discs. Sorry, these are quite small cards, and I should attempt to get better quality cards for these. So the 4 of discs. The prince, as we see, he likes his freedom. Certainly in the chariot, moving rather quickly. This 4 of discs is all about knowing your boundaries, working for a stable material life, and this is not really in his nature. It also implies knowing where your boundaries lie. You've got a castle here with a moat. Castle is very much it's all about boundaries. But the airy nature of the prince, he just goes through any set boundaries. So it's his weaker side. And he's not very good at grounding himself and knowing boundaries, so this is more of a hindrance to him than anything else, and yet it does nag in the background to try and balance him out, but he just seems to be too powerful for the influences of that card. 5 of Swords there. A card normally represents defeat that we've experienced in the world. Applied to the Prince of Swords, because we always apply these back to the card itself, it often represents self-defeat. So just as those swords turn in on themselves, as if to sort of self-wound, it's like the undisciplined mind of the prince can often self-sabotage his ideas in himself and his life. And so the chariot does not really move in a creative way. I think when I was talking about the Prince of Wands with a little bit of green underneath the chariot there, which represented his creativity. Well, the Prince of Swords is very much hit and miss with regards to creativity, and often it is miss. Having said that, we're now going on to the Six of Swords. I like this card because it proved difficult for me to interpret what signs got to do with tarot. The Six of Swords is Aquarius, ruled by Mercury. Aquarius, an air sign, and Mercury, again we're looking at the intellect there. So this gives rise to his mental and philosophical side. And as I've said, when he's attuned to this particular dynamic, then he's very highly creative, artistic, philosophical, able to analyse situations and abstract ideas. And Crowley does complement the give very complimentary qualities of the Prince of Swords when he's talking about his good qualities. This diagram here comes from French sword fighting picture here. I'm not sure whether... Oh yes, and here as well. I've got links to this on the in my article on my website, and that's where all of this I knew that had happened. Get it up. This pattern here, the square and the circle and the cross, is linked to here. You've got the circle and the cross there with all that geometrical stuff going on. So there's and it's supposed to do with the movement of men in sword fighting and which are the best positions to adopt. And it relates back to the Six of Swords because that's all to do about analysing situations and seeing which is the best route to take. So that's all I'm going to say about that. There's more details and the full article under the Minor Arcana video cast on the Six of Swords. So we're getting to this stage, so we're getting through the video now. I Ching and the Prince of Swords. This is the 57th hexagram, which is Sun, and we can see the two trigrams are identical, and that represents his double air quality. And this hexagram is called Penetrating Influence. It means when we're faced with a particular situation, it can only be influenced by gradual efforts in a consistent direction. So to influence things, you must apply yourself to clearly defined goals over a period of time. To influence a group, you must understand the spirit of the community, and again that takes time. But when you understand groups and people, because remember this all comes from Confucius and Chinese philosophy, and that's the side. Oh, blast! That thing is driving me nuts. Gives me a flipping heart attack every time that comes up. Okay, because it hasn't been scanned for a while. But this is all to do with Confucius, and Chinese philosophy is all about reducing conflict within your country, because whenever people think for themselves over in China there is conflict, so the idea was to unify the population. And there's many good things that's come out of Confucius. So anyway, that was the group influence, and I've talked a bit more about that in my article. So this quality of penetrating influence, it's steady action occurring over time to go to a clearly defined goal, and that is trying to counterbalance just his very dispersed nature. So that's what he has to do in order to improve his situation. He needs to gain some patience and slow down. And the Chinese say the wind is an invisible influence and can shape mountains over time, but but over time it produces quite radical results. So the wind they see is a very powerful tool. Applying this to the action of the mind, it can make you very efficient in achieving a goal, but patience is needed. Okay, divinatory meanings of the Prince of Swords. Can mean a well-educated person with highly developed intellect, someone who loves thinking and questioning and philosophizing. Could be someone really good at creating ideas quickly but moves on from them without really developing them. His intellect can prove draining to many who don't respond to conversations of the intellect and the speed at which he communicates, and I know a few people like that. Someone independent, private and difficult to get to know, and they may lack emotion, warmth and empathy. There's certainly no water in any of the cards, any of the 3 cards that he rules. So it can indicate a period where you need to slow down and analyse your thoughts. Again, when this comes up, it may be that you're not able to use your natural creativity the way you would like, and also that you play over negative events in your mind from the past, and so it clouds the future. So you're trying to move forward, but you've got all the geometrical patterns, you've got too much activity going on, and you can't really see the way forward. Right, have I got this last thing? 'Cause sometimes I forget that, and I have. Celtic cross interpretation. This is the last section. So, Prince of Swords turns up at number 1, the heart of the situation. Possible meanings: you can't see a clear way ahead, difficulty knowing where your life is heading, pulled in a lot of different directions all at once. So it could be someone with loads of things going on in their life, don't know which route to choose. Possible obstacle in the crossing card. Prince of Cups could mean that your mind is stuck in the past. Self-talk is negative. Unconscious influences. Lack of confidence from past hurts. Recent past. Prince of Cups of Swords turns there. Maybe your goals haven't worked out. The 5 of Swords aspect of him has given you some disappointment, and therefore it's knocked the querent's confidence. Hopes and goals here: to be clear about the future and to be able to follow your goals without being distracted. Be a possible interpretation. Number 6, short-term future. They could have a mix of ideas and they need to tease out what's important and make a plan. Self-image: someone intelligent, sometimes stuck in past disappointments, but always retain an optimism about the future. That's the 6 of Swords coming into play. So we see, by breaking down these cards, by knowing which cards they rule, it gives a much more rich interpretation here. You're not just going rote from a textbook. You're actually seeing the makeup of the card and how it plays out. Environment: it could be a partner who's very intellectual but lacks empathy and warmth. Number 9, guidance and warning. Need to be in touch with your heart as well as your head. Learn patience when moving towards a life goal. And finally, number 10, overall outcome. Someone that may be left confused as to their life direction. Many good ideas, but maybe haven't really achieved very much. So if the Prince of Swords does come out in this position, I would probably pull some more cards, or even look at the deep card, which is the bottom of the pack, to get more information on where the querent should move forward. So I wouldn't just leave them with the Prince of Swords here. I would develop the spread on slightly and give them something positive to go away with. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. And if you've missed anything or anything's unclear, then all of the notes are on my website. There's a link in the drop box below. Thanks very much, take care, and I really appreciate all the subscriptions I've got. It's very humbling. Thank you very much.